Alright, so this is a complete video about everything you need to know about situational awareness. That means we're going to be talking about the main concept of situational awareness, how the different type of briefings will help us to create and maintain situational awareness, and my favorite part of this video, which one is the one big main problem on trying to maintain situational awareness. So in this first part of the video, as I said, we're going to talk about the main concept of situational awareness, but also how to maintain it long term, and why we need to build this 3D mental scheme inside of our heads in order to have situational awareness. Hi, my name is Jorge Muñoz. I'm a senior instructor pilot working in El Salvador, and as always you will find the timestamps linked in the description below this video and also in a pinned comment down below in case you want to check out something in particular. So let's start with situational awareness. This concept means in a nutshell that you know everything that has happened, is happening and will happen during our flight. Okay, so now let's elaborate a bit more on that definition. To be able to say that you know everything that is happening on your flight, that means that when it comes down to operational and environmental wise, you need to have this 3D-like picture in your head, this 3D accurate perception of every factor that could affect the safety of your flight, before, during and after the flight has ended. And that's a very large portion of time where you need to have this solid 3D map in your head, so you can accurately handle the present and future status of the flight. Alright, so I think that the concept of situational awareness, it's actually fairly easy to understand. It's easy to know what we need to do, but that's just the first part. Now the hard part, the second part, is how the heck do we do it? How can we stay aware of every single thing, every single factor that is taking place even before that we turn on the engine, and that ends until after we turn off the engine? Well, that's why we need to have this 3D map / image / perception of the flight inside our heads. So now let's break down situational awareness into two general concepts, so we can start building our 3D thingy. The first concept is operational factors, and the second one is environmental factors. First, let's start deconstructing what operational factors includes, so we can start building our 3D map. Operational conditions basically means us, the ones having the flight. Try to see it like everything that is influenced or managed by us in some way or another, in some shape or form. Like the airplane systems, that means the electrical fuel systems or lubrication systems. You know, those kind of things. Also the fuel. Well, we need to be aware of how much fuel we have during the whole flight, how much we have used up to this point, and how much is it left. All that stuff must be within our knowledge at every single instance of the flight. If for some reason we don't know that, then how can I be confident that we are flying safe? Operational factors also includes things like the autopilot and the passengers. How many souls do I have on board? Is any of them some source of risk for me and for the flight? Is someone sick or under the influence of drugs or alcohol? Remember that situational awareness means that you are aware, that you know every single factor, every single aspect within your flight. So let's rewind for a bit. We can say that operational factors is everything that is inside the airplane, and including the airplane itself. And the second concept, environmental factors, it's all the rest. Everything that is outside the airplane, everything that is surrounding us. The second concept that we need to build our 3D mental map for the flight. As I said, this includes everything outside the airplane, outside our control. So we need to be aware of them, not because we can influence them to our own advantage, but to keep the control and the safety that we do have of our flight. Environmental factors includes such things as terrain, traffic, weather, and airspace. As you can see, we cannot control any of them, but we can be aware of our relationships with them, so we don't have to leave anything to chance. For example, I cannot directly control the type of terrain I will fly over while I'm heading to one airport or to another. But I can make a good flight plan so that the flight can remain safe throughout its entirety. This can be even more crucial when we're flying over mountainous terrain. Or when we talk about traffic, we cannot tell the other airplanes where to go or what to do. But we can all fly in harmony, so we don't get in each other's way. Nor we can control the weather, obviously. We can only be aware of where the bad weather and good weather is. It's midnight, by the way, but I have been postponing this video for like 3 days by now. Anywho, going back to the weather, I said we can only be aware of where the bad and good weather is and make sure to fly as much as we can over the good weather. Also the airspace. We don't make the rules for the airspaces we fly in, but we can and must be aware of the rules, limitations and dimensions of the airspace we're going to enter. Now that we have broken down this situational awareness concept and understood the two divisions it has, the operational factors, aka what is inside the airplane and what we can control, and the environmental factors, aka what is outside the airplane and outside of our control, what we can only be aware of, but not influence for the most part. With this, we can build a good 3D mental map of the situation we are in and be ready for what is to come next. And if creating this picture inside your head seems complicated for you at the beginning, don't worry too much about it. You will get better at this mental mapping of what you're doing with time and with more experience. It's just part of the process, but it will accelerate the process of actually happening if you make an active effort to create this mental picture of what is happening during the flight. Of course, if you have the opportunity to use resources like navigation, traffic, terrain or weather displays inside your airplane, that would improve and make so much more easier for you to keep situational awareness. Why? Well, because you don't only have a 3D map inside your head. You are literally looking at the map with the screen in front of you. And things like task management and risk management and everything we have discussed so far about SRM will also help you to maintain situational awareness. Easy things like the 5-piece checklist, knowing the internal and external resources for your flight, which is directly tied to what we have talked today. Okay, now we're going to continue with the second part of this video, where we will talk about all things briefings. What is a briefing? Why and how they will help us to maintain situational awareness? Which are the types of briefings that we can use? And finally, we will dive deep into one of those types of briefings. By the way, if this video is getting too long for your taste, you can find the more bite-sized versions of this video right here on your screen right now, or also linked in the description below. Look, I think that we all know what a briefing is, but just to cover up all our bases, a briefing is when we scope or break down what we are about to do next, so we can have a good mental image, / mental scheme or / mental map of some sort before we do the thing that we are intending to do. So in other words, we kind of study or rehearsal what we are about to do, so we can get a general idea before going all in. Basically, whenever you are preparing yourself and your mind for doing something that is going to happen or that could happen, you are doing a briefing. And briefing is an essential tool for us pilots to maintain our own and all the other souls inside the airplane situational awareness. Every pilot should do a detailed briefing for him or herself if alone, or a briefing between each other if there is more than one pilot inside the cockpit, even before getting on the airplane, to be able to have the best and widest possible mental scheme of everything that is going to happen during the flight. Doing a good briefing will prepare everyone inside the airplane for the critical phases of the flight, such as the takeoff briefing, before landing briefing, and also we cannot forget the passengers briefing, which, by the way, we pilots are required by law to show to our lovely passengers. Actually, the regulation only says that we must brief how the seatbelts and harnesses work. You know how to fasten and unfasten them. But if you want to go deeper than that into the passengers briefing and you want to make sure that your passengers know all they need to know before takeoff, you can use the mental acronym SAFETY, which we will be breaking down in just a moment. This safety checklist will help your passengers to have a fairly good understanding of how the airplane works. Of course, inside the scheme of what they need to know about the airplane, what they can and can't do, what they have at their disposal if an emergency shall appear. It will help them to have this mental image of what is about to happen during the flight. Below. Now let's start with the safety checklist for the passengers briefing. The S stands for safety belts. Just to cover our bases and the regulations, the bare minimum of what we have to do. As I said before, teach them how to fasten and unfasten their seat belts and harnesses, and when they should have these safety belts fastened. This part of the checklist must be completed before the airplane even starts moving on the ground. The next one, the A from the safety acronym, stands for air vents. This just means that you should show them where the air vents are inside the airplane so they can open and close them as they want. And if you're feeling fancy, then you can also show them how to use the heating and air conditioning of said air vents. Next one, we have the F, standing for fire extinguisher. First things first. I sincerely hope that you, as a pilot, know where this is located inside your airplane or the airplane you are flying. So you should also show your passengers its location, followed by a quick explanation of how it works. You know, just in case an emergency takes place and you are too busy doing something else trying to save everyone's life. Let your passengers help. Remember, they are not useless. The E stands for egress and emergency. This is a very important point of the checklist because it shows your passengers what to do, or at least where the stuff is inside the airplane during an out of the normal operation, such as an emergency. Be sure to show your passengers where the door or doors are inside the airplane and how to close them and open them properly. Do the same for the windows if you have. Also, don't forget to show them where the survival and emergency kit is located. Again, your passengers are not useless. Let them help if you feel like you can't do everything inside the airplane. On the fifth place, we have the T, standing for traffic and talking. Once again, show your passengers that everyone inside the airplane can have something to offer for the safety of the flight. In this case, they can help you in two different ways. One is by watching out for traffic, i.e. other airplanes nearby, because again, sometimes we, the pilots, have a lot to focus on at the same time, and a little hand that helps us spot the traffic will be very much appreciated. And the other way they can help is by remain silent and stay put. Remember, as some character from some animated movie that I can't remember right now said, remaining put, it's not the same as doing nothing, or something along those lines. What I mean by this is that don't be afraid to tell your passengers to stay quiet, or at least to avoid unnecessary conversations, i.e. what you're going to do when you get off the plane, during critical phases of the flight, i.e. the takeoff and landing and moments as such. During these critical moments, we need to be extra aware of everything. including communication with control tower, and just by not being something that we also have to take care of, the passengers are helping us a lot. Also, if you have headsets for everyone, make sure that everyone knows how to use them properly. Headsets makes much easier the communication between everyone inside the airplane. And finally, we have the why, which stands for your own questions. The passengers' questions. Remember that this checklist has covered up until this point the general things that we might need to create this 3D mental image. But every mind thinks different things and have a different point of view from the world and from the flight. So someone might still have a couple questions of something that we might have not mentioned during this checklist, and his or her mind maybe are still wondering a lot about it, or maybe they didn't understood something about what we have just said, even though we explain it really clear. So just make sure to ask for questions and that nobody has doubts about anything that is going to happen during the flight. Oh, and by the way, it is recommended that you complete this passenger's briefing before even starting the engine, when everyone is just sitting there inside the airplane, since it is fairly long and could interfere with other things that you may have to do when the engine has already started, and we don't want you to get distracted by that point. Hi, it's me from the future again. And before we continue to the third part of this video, let me tell you that if you want to become an outstanding private pilot, if you're curious and you want to prepare yourself in the best possible way for all the tests to come, or even if you are an advanced private pilot that wants to remember and perfect the basis and the knowledge from the VFR world, or if you want to start your private pilot training with a heads up over the others, then I highly recommend you should check out my book Essential Knowledge for Private Pilot. You will find the link of the book in the description below this video. It is an Amazon Kindle exclusive. This book uses the two most effective study techniques in the whole world, which are active recall and spaced repetition, and it applies them into aviation. If that sounds good to you, then please go check out the book in the description below. It is available in English as well as Spanish. Remember, you shouldn't be studying hard, you should be studying effectively, and with this book you can do just that. This book will help you to understand a lot of your ins and outs of how your airplanes work, how its instruments work, its engine, and everything you need to know about aerodynamics. That will considerably increase your situational awareness and will help you create a mental scheme of how this thing that you're flying actually works and how aerodynamics interact with it. Going forward, we're going to continue talking about the two other briefings that we mentioned before. I'm talking about the takeoff briefing and the before landing briefing. What should they include and when is the right time to do them? So let's start with what the takeoff briefing is. And the thing here is that it's basically the same concept of what a normal briefing is. Just like we discussed in the last episode, it's a mental rehearse, mental scope or mental breakdown, however you wanna call it, but this time applied to this specific portion of the flight, which is the takeoff. So with this briefing, what you're trying to do is to get the same mental scheme that we have been talking about for ages at this point, to prepare ourselves for what it's about to happen or that could happen during any portion of the flight. But this time it's only about this critical portion of the flight. What happens moments before, during, and moments after the takeoff. After all, as we have said before, the main goal of having briefings is to help us to have a good situational awareness and to maintain it at all moments. Now, what should include a takeoff briefing? Basically, everything that is important to us, such as wind direction and velocity. Remember that the amount of crosswind that we have is very important, and especially on light aircraft, since we cannot handle too much of it. Once we have that, we can also determine the runway that we are going to use. And it is always important to know which runway of the airport you are going to use. Well, first because we must need to know how much takeoff distance we have available, or if the runway has a displaced threshold and some other things. But it is very important also, once we have our runway, we can brief the possible taxiways that we are going to use, so that the ATC doesn't catch us with our pants down, because you were expecting completely different runways, and therefore different taxiways when speaking to them. Especially if you are a new student pilot. Having this happening to you will make your life much more difficult. So do yourself a favor and make a good briefing before getting on the airplane. It will only take you a few minutes. Hate to be sick. And these few minutes will certainly improve your fluency when speaking on the radio. You have my word. Anywho, once we have our runway, we can also brief our initial heading and altitude. Remember, it is all about to rehearse so we can create a mental image of what is going to happen over there. It is easier to do something for the first time if we have already done it before in our minds. Also, don't forget your takeoff climbing speeds. You can easily find these ones on your POH. We don't want to stall the airplane, right? Especially when we have little to no altitude to play with. Be sure to also brief your departure procedures, or i.e. what you're going to do, / where you're going to go during the following seconds or even minutes after you took off. And finally, you can't leave the ground without starting your emergency briefing. Your emergency procedures for an engine failure during takeoff. That means that with that you have at least like 5 different procedures to brief, depending of the different instances and procedures of the takeoff. I'm talking about if you have or not enough altitude to try to restart the engine. Remember, it is not only about the things that are going to happen, it is also about what could happen during these moments, these critical moments. And since we don't have real engine failures on our everyday flights, it is even more crucial for us to rehearse them on our minds so we know what we have to do and we have fresh that knowledge. In the end, doing all this will only take us a very small portion of our time, and we will substantially increase our situational awareness. Now let's talk about the other briefing. That is the before landing briefing. It's the video. A good before landing briefing should include the general airport information and weather conditions. I mean, it's a no-brainer to know what kind of weather to expect. What kind of weather we will be facing when we arrived to the airport. That includes winds, temperature, if it's raining, snowing, cloudy, foggy, or heck, what if we are lucky and it is a good day? All that kind of stuff. You get the point. It's another no-brainer to brief which one is the active runway, since, well, we need that information to land our airplane. I think we don't need further explanation about that. So, going forward with the briefing, also make sure to include the terrain and obstacles of the airport and its surroundings. We need to know if there is any mountains, tall buildings or antennas, and such nearby the airport or on the runway's glide slope, because that will entirely affect the way we perform our approach to the airport. It will affect where we can start our descent, and because of that, it can also affect our descent rate. Next on, we can also brief the airport elevation and traffic pattern altitude if you didn't include that already on the general information of the airport portion. After all, we don't want to descend too low before ever being able to reach the runway, nor to stay too high so that we cannot make a good descent and traffic pattern to the airport. And last but not least, we should also brief the entry that we're going to use to get into said traffic pattern. The entrance will change depending where we are coming from, in regard to the airport and also the active runway. Usually you perform this briefing after you get the airport information via ATIS, which is an automated frequency that gives you the current airport information, for those that are not too familiarized with this concept, or by talking to the ATC directly. But you can also, and I personally recommend, to make a before landing briefing along with the takeoff briefing. Yes, before you get on the airplane. And yes, I know that sometimes things can change by the time that you are about to land, but some other things won't, like the elevation of the airport or the obstacles around it. It is always better, in my opinion, to have a complete mental scope of the whole flight since the very beginning. Since, just as the takeoff briefing, the end goal of this one is to improve our situational awareness as much as possible for each individual flight. Now we're heading to the last segment of this video, and maybe my favorite one. Here we will be talking about which one is the main big problem when trying to maintain situational awareness, what causes this problem, and which ones are some of the possible solutions we can use to solve this problem, along with another sneaky little obstacle when trying to maintain situational awareness that a lot of people might not even take it ever into consideration. So far we have talked a lot about how to create and maintain situational awareness. So now we're going to dive deep into what obstacles we can encounter that will make that difficult for us as pilots to accomplish our goal of situational awareness. Alright, so you probably already know this, but just as a disclaimer, we are going to assume that we're actually trying to do our very best job possible inside the airplane. But either way, we are still struggling with situational awareness. And it doesn't really matter if it is aviation or life in general. It is very common that when we are trying to maintain a certain level of proficiency doing whatever we are trying to do, either it can be flying an airplane, working at an office, studying for your exams, or doing something that demands a certain amount of brain horsepower from you. The problem usually is that there is a lack of concentration, i.e., even though we are trying really hard to stay focused, our mind still constantly drifts from one place to another, from one thought to the next one. So if you're trying to do your job, whatever that implies, but you just can't, it usually can be pinpointed to not being able to get our mind together and stay concentrated. Okay, so now we know the problem, but in order to solve that problem, we need to know what causes it in the first place. For the most part, in these cases, factors like fatigue, stress, work overload, or the combination of all three can be the root of our lack of attention. So, if we talk about aviation, working under the effects of something like fatigue will not allow us to perform at our absolute best, to our full capacity. Our mind and body will be feeling tired all the time, even sleepy at some moments. It will reduce our attention so much that we might even stop doing some of the tasks that we have to complete during the flight, like checking our parameters or looking out for traffic, or similar stuff, which, as you can imagine, even though it's something that sounds pretty easy and simple to do, and it certainly is when we are mentally and physically in good shape, not doing these simple tasks might spell disaster for the flight. I think we all know pretty well how fatigue works on us, and I'm sure that if you didn't notice it before, now that you know, you can probably tell if your lack of concentration or situational awareness it's being caused by this. And sorry, but for fatigue, the only solution is rest. You need to let yourself off from the gas pedal just for a bit. Also, stress is pretty similar to fatigue in the sense that it reduces our maximum capacity of thinking things right, of performing to our absolute best. It causes us to be nervous, it forces us to act under an abnormal amount of pressure, and in today's life, Sadly, there are just so many things that can cause us to fall victim of stress. Related to our job or not, it will have an effect on it to an extent. Things like problems inside our family, with our partner, our boss pushing us to work more, lack of sleep, some major negative event that took place on our lives just a few days or even weeks ago. Things along those lines are present virtually on everyone's life almost every day. They shouldn't be, but sadly, reality is often not as nice. So go and see what is causing you stress in your life and it's preventing you from giving it all in your everyday life. Search for that thing in your head that never leaves you alone. And to end this segment, we also have the work overload factor, i.e. in this case being burnt out. This often happens when you are just doing too much of whatever you are doing. It doesn't matter if you like it, if you enjoy it. At some point, which is different for everyone, you have enough of doing something and that's fine. We all have to find a balance in our life. I'm sweating. If you do happen to start feeling burnt out, then try switching things up as much as you can. I mean, of course we have to do our job. I'm not telling you to leave your job if you need it to survive and you have no other option. Most of us are in that situation. But when you're not working, try do something new, like practicing a new sport, going out on a dinner with your pals more often, even if it is not a Friday night. Just go for it. Go to the theater. Start that new hobby that you have been interested in for a while now. Do something to change your routine. Assuming you do enjoy your job, be sure to also include in your life something else that you enjoy. It can be literally whatever you want. And you can also see what you can do to change your work itself, or at least how you perceive your work. Play some instrumental music in the background if you are alone in your office, or if the people that you are with have no problem with that. Go work at a coffee shop or somewhere else if you can. Treat yourself with something every time you complete a task, every time you finished doing some specific task. Work alongside a friend or a co-worker that you like. Good company always makes for a better environment. Even something so simple as changing the usual phrase of I have to work or I have to do this or that or X or Y. Change that for the phrase I get to do this work. It's my decision and I want it. Just changing that simple phrase will change a lot on how you perceive your day to day. Like, for real, I have tried it before when I have been feeling burnt out or I know that I'm near reaching that point of feeling burned out. I still use it to this day. Like, for me personally, everything feels just better when I do something because I want to do it, not because I have to do it. In the end, feeling burnt out, it's usually temporary. With a little bit of time, you should be feeling good and back to normal on what you're doing. And if you're a pilot and you are sitting here thinking that when it comes down to flying an airplane, having a work overload doesn't mean any of this, then it is because we have already had a complete video discussing everything about it. I'll leave you that link of that video right here on your screen right now, or also linked in the description below if you want to learn about work overload when it comes down specifically for us pilots inside aviation. I just thought that this concept from the general point of view, not just from a pilot's point of view, might also help you and someone else that is struggling with this. But in a nutshell, work overload also means that you have a great number of chores to do within a very short period of time, which can also cause on us to feel burned out after the flight. So after all, there it is, the burned out part in some way. So there you go. In conclusion, all these three factors, fatigue, stress and work overload, cause a distraction for us. It grabs part of our attention and therefore we see a decrease on our performance, on our situational awareness. And remember, all the possible solutions that I have talked about in this video to solve these three problems are just an advice of mine. It's what has worked for me or for people that I know, and I think it can work for more people. You can probably search for more advice about how to deal with these problems in the internet, by your own, by talking to a professional, or however you want. And just to add up a bit, the other possible obstacle to maintaining situational awareness after a while of doing your job, when you start feeling very comfortable while working, perhaps too comfortable, it's complacency. That means that we are too relaxed about what we're doing, to the point that we might start letting mistakes through, because everything we do has now just become part of the routine. This is the other extreme of the spectrum of fatigue, stress and work overload. We are still having a decreased performance on our job, but this time it is not because we are too tense at the moment of doing our job, like before. This time we are just too relaxed. So the thing that you have to aim for is that sweet middle spot. Not like stressed about your work, but also not extremely relaxed. We all have to find a good in-between. Treat your work or whatever you're trying to do pretty much with the same attention to detail you had when you first started. That's the middle sweet spot. That's the only solution to complacency. And I'm not talking about doing things slow, but good. It's not that easy to find that sweet spot, but I'm sure that you can do it. If you found this video interesting, then you should go check out this video over here, where we talk all things task management. Or maybe this video over here, if you want to know more about the two most effective study techniques in the whole world, and about the essential knowledge for private pilot. Thank you very much for watching. Subscribe, like, comment and all that stuff, and I hope to see you in another video. Bye bye.